Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start with our Republicans in Washington. Let's start with our elected leaders in the fair city of Washington, D.C. The folks who are supposed to be the folks who are sane and rational, the people that we put in charge to do our bidding, to make good decisions, to be our betters a little bit, to lead the way. Yesterday, I gave Mitch McConnell credit for being open to the idea of the January 6th commission, being open to the idea of supporting it. I was kind of shocked, kind of surprised. I was really shocked and surprised because he's Dr. No. There's nothing going to come out of him generally that's helpful. So I was surprised. I was taken aback by Mitch McConnell showing some bit of sanity and some bit of decency. That has changed today. He now opposes the January 6th commission. No, we can't have a bipartisan commission of folks looking into the treason of January 6th. No, can't do that. Now, why this is interesting, because the Republicans in the House, and I'll be honest, there were 35 Republicans who voted for the January 6th commission. But today in the House of Representatives, the bill setting up the bipartisan 9/11 style commission was voted in favor of 252 to 175. That means 175 Republican representatives, the Scott Perry types, my congressman, the Lauren Boeberts, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Matt Gaetzes, those folks. All of the Republican representatives from Pennsylvania, except Brian Fitzpatrick from the Philadelphia area, voted to, we don't need to look into that. No. Move along. Nothing to see here. Not a big deal. It was a tourist day, like any other day. Like any other day. And my favorite, Representative Ralph Norman of South Carolina, who said that he didn't see who did the poll that said the people who stormed the Capitol, the people who were using the flag poles to stab policemen and hitting people with flag poles and pipes and all kinds of stuff and defecating on the floor of our Capitol. He didn't know who did the poll to say that those were Trump supporters. And I don't know that you need a poll because they were literally carrying flags saying, "We're Trump supporters." They were wearing the uniforms. It was pretty simple to pick them out. MAGA hat. Yeah, that's them. Pretty simple. And even the ones that they've arrested said, yeah, that's us. It's us. But he still wants a poll. Wants a poll to make sure that they were true. They were true Trump supporters. And the weird thing is Mike Pence's own brother, Greg Pence, a Republican representative from Indiana, he opposes the commission. This is that moment where I go, I'd kind of like to be there for Thanksgiving dinner. Kind of, just a little bit. Because if you remember on January 6th, the idea that the geniuses and the brainiacs had as they were storming our Capitol was to build a gallows and hunt for Mike Pence so they can hang Mike Pence. This was a bipartisan attack. And I guess the Trump supporters are more bipartisan than the Republicans are. But even Mike Pence, nope, we're not gonna dig into it. We're not going to investigate it. Let sleeping dogs lie. Crazy. Now you go, but Rick, they want to move past it. They want to move past the treason. They don't want to relive that day. It was traumatic. They have trauma. And I'm waiting for this one. I really am waiting for this one. You're not respecting our trauma. the trauma that they caused, mind you, because the guy who said that it was a tourist day, remember him? The guy from Georgia who said, it was just, it's like any other day. People were walking between the ropes. They were just taking pictures. It was no big deal. It was like any other day in the Capitol. They actually have video of him doing physical labor. He was actually barricading the door, and I'm going, when was the last time you actually saw one of these people do a day's work of actual physical labor, other than when it's saving their behinds? Because you didn't see one Republican go out there and go, hey guys, stop. You didn't see one of them. Why? Because they were scared. They were running for their lives like everyone else. Because they understood the genie got out of the bottle. Crazy's gone way too far. And look, if Paul Gosar and Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan and all of them, Marjorie Taylor Greene, if Lauren Boebert, any of them would have stepped out of their protective barricades and come out and said, hey, folks, this isn't what we do in America. This isn't right. Stop. Turn around and get out. I'd have respected them. But they didn't. They hid like everybody else because they knew that what they had done caused this. And they knew that their heads were on the chopping block too. And they don't want to have to testify to that. They don't want to have to be pulled into where they're compliant. I was not surprised when the minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, came out and said that he was against it. Not surprised a little bit. Because he's implicated in it from top to bottom. He's going to have to testify. So if I had the option, this is one of those things where you go, if I had the chance to say, I don't want to go on trial. I don't want to have to testify in front of a congressional committee. I don't want to have to plead the fifth while I'm a sitting congressman. And I can vote against even having the commission. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to do like the Republican Party has done. They have gone too far. I do, however, really like Tim Ryan. I hope the good folks in Ohio vote him in as a senator there. I think he would make a fabulous senator. But he was on the floor of the House giving his little spiel. And here's Congressman Tim Ryan.
I want to thank the gentleman from New York and the other Republicans who are supporting this and thank them for their bipartisanship. To the other 90% of our friends on the other side of the aisle, holy cow. Incoherence. No idea what you're talking about. Benghazi, you guys chased the former Secretary of State all over the country, spent millions of dollars. We have people scaling the Capitol, hitting the Capitol Police with lead pipes across the head, and we can't get bipartisanship. What else has to happen in this country? Cops. This is a slap in the face to every rank and file cop in the United States. If we're going to take on China, if we're going to rebuild the country, if we're going to reverse climate change, we need two political parties in this country that are both living in reality, and you ain't one of them.
We need two political parties that are living in reality, and you ain't one of them. And that's true. I mean, you listen to the things that they've said. They're not living in reality. And they know they're not living in reality. They know they don't want to have to defend their actions leading up to that day. They know they don't want to have to explain why they did what they did. So am I surprised? No. But the hypocrisy is kind of interesting because remember, now for my Republican friends who go, no, they're just, remember Benghazi? Because Tim Ryan brought it up there. There were 10 investigations. 10. The longest series of investigations, as I understand it, in the history of the country went on over, 2.5 years? Over the tragic death of four people in Benghazi. And look, we should have investigated. But they chased Hillary Clinton everywhere. 11 and a half hours she testified. And they don't want to get grilled like that. And they're saying, no, we should have none. We should have no investigations into this. Now they're arguing, well, the FBI's looking into it. They will hold criminals accountable. Because all they want, and understand, Trumpkins, this is them selling you out. This is them saying, those people who went in there, they may have just been tourists and, they were just taking pictures. They're throwing you under the bus because you're the level where they want it to stop. That's as far as they want the investigations to go. They want to throw you in jail. They don't want the moneyed interest being exposed. They don't want their part in this exposed. Just you. And I got to tell you, I think I might want to reconsider this. Now, what I find, hysterical is we're in this moment where Republicans have shown their hand. They've shown who they are. There are 35, I guess, now that have some bit of sanity. 10 of them are the ones who voted for impeachment for Donald Trump after January 6th. We're in this moment where Democrats had better figure out what they're going to do. Because that idea of bipartisanship that we keep being thrown at, well, we got to do things in a bipartisan way. We got to give that up. At this point, you've tried, it's failed. This should have been something 435-0 in the House, 100-0 in the Senate. We should have said, yes, we want a bipartisan commission with equal powers on both sides and subpoena power to investigate every bit of this and find every person who spent $1 making this happen. The worst attack on our ground in my lifetime. Domestic terrorism at its worst. And you go, meh. And if Democrats don't wake up, this is one of those moments where you go, you're going to lose again and again. And Rick Wilson, the Republican strategist, he had a comment that says, use power or it will be taken from you. And the internets went crazy. Oh my gosh, Rick Wilson, you're so smart. You're brilliant. Rick Wilson is not Magellan. He basically spat out a tiny nugget of common sense. If you don't use the power that you have at the moment you have it, you are going to lose it. I'm not saying abuse it, but the Republicans have been masters at talking bipartisanship. They've been masters at, while talking bipartisanship, watering down any legislation that might be good for working people, for anyone but their corporate buddies. They do a great job of the talk. They do a great job of then gutting that legislation and then voting against it. And, of course, then railing against the people who voted for it while saying, well, we tried. They would. No, what you end up with is basically Obamacare. We didn't get the public option we wanted because, well, we were reaching out to Republicans. This was a bipartisan thing. It wasn't bipartisan. They didn't vote for it. They were never going to vote for it. It's like Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown again and again and again and again, and all of us going, Charlie Brown, don't do it. So I'm telling you, DNC, Democratic leadership, don't do it. Don't go for the football. Walk up and grab it from her and kick it yourself. This is one of those moments where it's so apparent to anyone paying attention that there isn't a rational political party on the other side. The Republicans are never going to come along. What they're doing right now is classic GOP. It's their modus operandi. It is what they do. Everything's the most socialist, most Marxist, most communist ever. We can't possibly do anything outside of what we've always done because then that would be the Marxist win. The communists win. Socialist. And you go, but hold on. All Joe Biden's really talking about doing is going back to what we did when my grandparents' generation roamed the earth. I had an interesting conversation with an older gentleman today, and he wouldn't tell me his age. I assume he went to the Ohio State University back in the early 60s, I believe 1960. So that puts him probably in his early 80s. But this is a guy who seems to remember there being a bit of bipartisanship and things getting done. Going back to those days where, as divided as the two of us were on the political issues, because he was a big Trump guy, the thing we agreed on is the moneyed interests have controlled this country for far too long. And the GOP is bought and paid for, and has been for a very long time. Why is it that anything that we want to get done for working people is dead on arrival? Why is it we can't get a minimum wage increase? Why is it we can't strengthen labor laws to protect workers on the job and give them the ability to collectively bargain for better wages, hours, conditions? That stuff used to be nonpartisan until the GOP said no more. We used to invest in infrastructure. We used to invest in education and healthcare and all these things. Now, this guy told me back when he went to the Ohio State University back in 1960, it was $90 a semester. That means minimum wage was $1 an hour at the time. That means in 90 hours of work, you could pay for a semester at the Ohio State University. Sorry, you're probably not even buying your books for 90 hours a week at minimum wage in these days. You get nowhere close to paying your full tuition. Why? Because we had a tax structure. That 56% tax rate on corporations, 91% tax rate on the very wealthy. Now, we both agreed nobody paid those things. There were many loopholes to get away from it, but the money went into those institutions. And what's happened, Reagan to now, is we've created a massive billionaire class that's caused us this kind of mass division, this inequality that we're not happy with. Even the people who are doing okay in this economy are worried that, I could be next. We better figure out how to get around to doing the right thing. Because look, I look at the division in Congress. That's our fault. We're the ones who have been easily divided. And if the Democrats don't figure out how to grab that power and actually do something positive to make people's lives better, I've said it before, they're going to get slaughtered in 2022. Just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. That was the day 31 dock workers were killed and hundreds more were injured in an explosion at the Raritan River Port in South Amboy, New Jersey. Workers were loading ammunition from freight trains onto ships. The freight's ultimate destination was Pakistan. Practically every structure in South Amboy suffered some form of serious or structural damage, with windows blown out everywhere and debris reported as far as 25 miles away. 5,800 more unexploded anti-personnel mines had been strewn about the port. Demolition experts had to be called in for removal. A subsequent fire at a nearby agricultural phosphorus plant complicated their work. The blast was caused by the detonation of 150 tons of military explosives and gelatin dynamite. The piers, equipment, and railroad cars were all demolished. Over a dozen nearby barges were either on fire or sank. Emergency operations went into effect and a state of emergency was declared. Key industries in the immediate area were seriously damaged, including the International Smelting and Refining Company, Pennsylvania Railroad maintenance shops, and the power plant for New Jersey Power and Light. According to a report by the National Board of Fire Underwriters and the Fire Insurance Rating Organization of New Jersey, packing of the mines and fuses by the Kilgore Company was not in accordance with Army standards, and labeling was confusing. The shipped mines were labeled as M1A1, though all parts but the detonator were identical to M1 mines, discontinued by the Army in 1942 for their apparent defective fuse, leading to accidental firing and explosions. The report refrained from drawing a certain cause or assigning blame. Instead, the underwriters offered a number of possible scenarios and recommendations for best practices to be implemented. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So like I said, I got to be honest. I want to be at the Pence family Thanksgiving. I want to be somewhere near the table when Mike asks his brother, explain to me why it is you didn't want me almost being hung to be investigated. I guess just one of those things. But like I said, the thing that's scary in all this is the people who were barricading themselves, who are actually doing some lifting and putting things in front of doors, how quickly they have turned on this. And here to share some thoughts on the news of the day, only 35 Republicans voted to have a commission on the January 6th attack. I think that speaks volumes. And here to share some thoughts on what this means, I've asked our good friend Justin Hendrix to come talk with us. Justin's a volunteer organizer with Not Above the Law Coalition, their website, notabovethelaw.org. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So are we surprised 35? I'll tell you, I was surprised it was that high.
So you were pleasantly surprised, I suppose.
I actually was. I was surprised. I'm not going to go pleasantly. I'm going to go, I was surprised.
Well, I think that, it represents a big push. There was a big push before this vote to make sure that people out there who care about what happened on January 6th and care about this commission all across the country call into their representatives and demand this independent commission get created. But, even more than that, I think you saw legitimate bipartisan effort. John Katko, Republican from New York, and Benny Thompson came together and wrote a piece of legislation that incorporated all of the changes that Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans had asked for, and really gave significant, ground to the Republicans on how the commission would operate. And so, on some level, when Katko was put in the ridiculous position today of having to, essentially fight for Republican support after having been put in a position to advance this bill, I think a lot of folks heard what he was saying and sympathized on some degree. It's a lot more people than voted for impeachment.
Yeah, but here's the thing. This is what Republicans have done for a very long time. This is their MO. They spend time watering down legislation under the guise of, we're going to seek a bipartisan solution. You then water it down, you then weaken it, and then they don't vote for it anyway. And I think, again, this is what Rick Wilson was talking about. If you have the power and you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Well, this is, a real possibility that this will now go to the Senate, and that Senate Republicans will put a stop to it. Mitch McConnell, you may have been talking about this earlier in the show, has already indicated that he intends to hold things up, and we've seen other senators as well who have kind of thrown cold water on this. But we'll see. I mean, others have kind of withheld their judgment so far, and we don't know exactly how it'll play out in the Senate. Yeah. I think it'd be incredibly cynical for the Republicans to filibuster this, especially after a vote that truly did come out very bipartisan. 250 votes for this, and it'd be extraordinary and another stain on Mitch McConnell if he chooses to stand in the way of this.
Yeah, but he doesn't care about stains. That doesn't matter to him. That's not his concern. So you look at this, and I fully expect him to try and do everything he can do to block it. It'll be interesting to see if there are 10 Republicans who have a conscience and remember what happened on that day as they were running away from a lynch mob, literally a lynch mob, scurrying for safety. If there'll be 10 of them with the courage to step forward and go, no, we do need to get to the bottom of this.
Well, I'm interested to see what happens in these next 2 days because, this is an incredibly emotional and, dramatic vote that will take place in the Senate on some level. This is a decision about whether they are going to continue to go with Trump, whether they are going to continue to obfuscate, whether they're going to continue to support the big lie. And, you might see some interesting parties get involved in this before it's all said and done. Today, you saw 40 or 50 Capitol Police put out a statement. We might see more from the families of the officers who died to advocate for this. There have been some effort on their part to advocate for this commission, and we may see other groups, potentially staffers. I talked last night with a staffer from Yvette Clarke's office, who happens to be my congresswoman here in New York, in Brooklyn. And Remington Belford, told me, about what it was like to be in the Capitol that day, and the fear he had, and how it's changed the feeling he has about his work environment, and about how Congress works. And, I think that some of those voices, if they rise to the fore again, it could really put a lot of pressure, especially on folks like Susan Collins, Ben Sasse, Pat Toomey, Mitt Romney, to make the right decision.
Yeah, but here's the thing: the congressman from Georgia said it was like any other day. People were walking between the ropes, taking pictures. It was like any other day. If you wouldn't have known that was the day it was going on, you would have thought it was just a normal day, Justin. There was nothing important about that day.
Well, as you well know, quickly the media found photographs of him helping to barricade the doors because, in fact, he was afraid for his life. And those types of shameful comments, on some level, you have to be at least, somewhat optimistic that the majority of Congress today put all of that away and at least voted to do the right thing by a good margin. And we'll see what it means. And, on some level, maybe this is a beginning of a crack. Put the commission aside for a moment. The fact that 35 Republicans went against McCarthy and explicitly went against Trump, maybe that's a good sign on some level that maybe things are changing a little bit. The wind's blowing in a little bit of a different direction. But I am very hopeful that this commission passes in the Senate. If it doesn't, then Democrats have some options available to them for how to continue to investigate what is an incredibly important and I think crucial moment in American history that we got to get to the bottom of.
Yeah. Now, is this a moment where I had someone bring up to me today that is this a moment that Democrats then go and pull the trigger on doing away with the filibuster?
I personally in favor of that, and I don't know how you feel about it, Rick, but I feel like at this point we've got to move forward. And we can't continue this sort of, tyranny of this Republican minority. And, you see it in so many different ways. You see it in the Supreme Court, you see it in the Senate, and you see it, of course, in gerrymandering in the House on some level. And on some level, think about the majority that was represented in that vote today. Think about the majority of Americans who want to know the truth about what happened on January 6th. They deserve that. That's what their elected representatives asked for today. And if we find once again that this minority party, which represents quite a lot less of the population than those in power, is able to put up a roadblock to something so significant and so historic and important, well, that's a shame. And I do think that Chuck Schumer has to think about his options.
Well, this comes down, it's not Chuck Schumer as much as it is Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly and the two from Virginia and Tester. And there's a number of them. Those are the ones you got to think about.
Absolutely. But, this January 6th commission, we've been talking about it now for 4 months. And one of the issues that we've got is that even in the current legislation, there's a deadline, and that is December the 31st. And so, the longer this debate goes on and the longer it takes to kind of bring it to the floor, the more likelihood that we'll see a constrained commission, that may not even have the chance to get many subpoenas out, for instance, before it's in a position that it has to kind of begin to think about how to close shop or maybe pass off parts of its investigation to, other committees or other bodies. So this is crucial that we get this done right now.
Yeah, no, because you give them time to do their work. And why December 31st, the end of this? The Benghazi hearings were 2.5, almost 3 years long. Why the difference?
So if you have listeners that are out there that are involved in advocating around this, or they're calling their representatives, I think this is something to raise. And it's a question. I think I don't know the answer if it was part of the negotiation. Seems to have been on some level that all parties seem to want to get this done before the midterms kick off and before it becomes a kind of political football in election season. But on the other hand, I agree. Why in the world would you want it to have it only 6 months? This is an entity that doesn't exist yet. It's May 19th. We're talking today. By the time this gets stood up, I'm sure it'll be into the summer, and we'll be bearing down on the fall. will it even have a chance to get out the queries that it needs to get out urgently enough to get the information back on time?
Because for me, to investigate this properly, I separate this into a couple of different categories. There are the people who broke into the Capitol. There are the people who kicked down the doors, who smashed the windows, who beat the cops up, who defecated on our floor and urinated on the desks. There are those people. And you deal with them, and we have trials for them. We put them in jail. For me, there's the other class of people, though, the ones who encouraged this, the ones who, with their rhetoric and their influence, someone like Trump and Lord Boebert and Josh Hawley and the rest of them, they have to be held accountable for their behavior, and that has to come out. And then there's the third part, the people who have been funding this kind of stuff for so long, that all this dark money that flows into these hate groups and into these organizations. For me, that's the really important one. Everyone else just pawns in this game. It's the moneyed interest that I think we're going to go after. But sadly, if we've only got a 6-month investigation, I know exactly who we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the idiot with the wool hat and the one with the Vikings helmet, and we're going to focus on those people because those are the bad folks, without looking at the other two categories. That's just my thought.
Well, I'd agree with that on some level, and I'd also maybe add one other party. I've done a lot of writing about how the information ecosystem warped itself around this demagogue, Donald Trump, and the way that certain parties that you mentioned utilized social media, and the extent to which they both organized there and also were able to advance the big lie. So political elites, absolutely, we need to look at. We need to look at the media and the information ecosystem and the way that lies propagate and the way that extremist groups organize in order to participate in this violence at the Capitol. So those are important things. And I agree, it'll be tough to do in 6 months' time. But on some level, we've got to do it. We've got to answer these questions, because the reality is that the movement that spawned January 6th, I don't know that we can say that it's necessarily gotten any smaller or that it's been weakened. The big lie continues to get advanced every day. It continues to be, go through various permutations. Zoe Lofgren put out a report of social media posts from over 100 Republicans that either advanced the big lie, that participated in, the rallies and some of the events that took place prior to January 6th. In some cases, showing images of them with some of the white supremacists and other militia groups that took part in that day, and in some cases glorifying the assault on the Capitol. And you're right. We've got to get to the bottom of that. And it doesn't surprise me that 175 Republicans voted against that, because they're certainly complicit and afraid of that investigation.
And again, this is, I get the inclination of we got to cut it off at December 31st because, next year is an election year and we don't want this hanging over our heads. This has got to be the election issue next year. If you're running against a Republican who voted against this commission, who has been involved in this stuff, this is that moment for we the voters to decide. Ultimately, I blame everything on we the voters. We're the ones who make the choices for the people who sit in these offices, for the people who are our so-called leaders. If we don't throw the bums out, so to speak, and in mass numbers, what does that say about us?
Well, 100%. But I would just add on top of that what January 6th was about is denying the interest of the voter, denying the decision of the voter. And that's very clearly where the Republican Party, on some level, the Trumpist part of the Republican Party would like to take things.
Well, that's where they are, Justin. I mean, I'm sure you saw the CBS YouGov poll the other day, where only a third of Republicans think that the election was fair and legitimate, and 2/3 think that it was stolen. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, and if one or two people at state level, did things differently in 2020, we would potentially be in a world of pain around the outcome of the election we just had. It's very easy to imagine. I'm sure you talk about this all the time, Rick, so I'm not saying anything your listeners don't know. It's very easy to imagine another crisis, maybe not on the federal level, maybe it's in a state capital in the next year or 2 years. But certainly by the time we get to 2024, it's possible that this sort of thing could happen again. If Republicans have both the House and the Senate, Do we believe that the transfer of power would go according to the vote of the people? I'm not sure. But that's what this commission is meant to be about. That's what it's meant to look at. Not only what happened on January 6th, but what were the conditions that allowed it to happen? What were the enabling factors? What were the key questions about what happened not only at the Capitol, but in the White House and in other parts of the government, and what happened in the broader information ecosystem that permitted it. So I think it's crucial, and I hope today, is the start and not potentially the end of it.
Yeah, but I agree with Liz Cheney. I think McCarthy has to testify. I think all of them. I want Boebert on the stand. I want Marjorie Taylor Greene. I want whoever was giving tours the day before. I want all of them under oath, putting the hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help them the God they keep throwing at us.
We absolutely have a huge public education role for this commission, and hopefully it can get underway and it can actually host some hearings, live hearings with witnesses, and I think that would grip the country, and I think there would be a real opportunity for people to learn. This is a civics lesson on some level. Why is this so terrible? Why are so many people so concerned about it? We have, to some extent, got to advance the truth, and whenever we can. And you and I have talked about so many different issues on this show, whether it was the Russia investigation, the impeachments, the rest. In many ways, all of those investigations were about asserting the truth, and trying to get to the bottom of it and to the danger against our democracy. And that's what this is about too.
Yeah. So last question I've got for you. What do we do to get this pushed through? Obviously, we're going to be calling our senators, and often here in Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey is the target. What do we do outside of that?
100% it's time to start calling your senators. And I would add that if you have friends or family that are in a state that has a Republican senator, give them a call this weekend and tell them how important it is to you, and let them know that when this thing comes to a vote, they need to be making that phone call as well, in particular in those red states and in places that have Republican senators, because it's all going to come down to how do a few folks feel about this, and whether they're willing to part with Mitch McConnell and part with Donald Trump.
There you go. Justin, I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work. I hope to have you back on real soon.
Thank you, sir.
Good stuff. Our good friend Justin Hendrix. Make sure you check out the work that he's doing over at notabovethelaw.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that black author and Marxist theorist C.L.R. James passed away. James was born in Trinidad, at the time a Caribbean colony that was part of the British Empire. His father was a school teacher. James became a leading intellectual on the subject of black liberation. His most famous work, The Black Jacobins, tells the story of the 1791 Haitian Revolution, when enslaved black Haitians successfully overthrew French colonial rule. James was a frequent contributor to Labor Action, a Marxist journal produced in New York from 1940 to 1958. He wrote about the struggles of black workers. He often penned fiery language. For example, in 1941, James wrote an article imploring black workers not to cross the picket line during a strike against the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Ford had a reputation of hiring black workers at a time when many employers discriminated in their employment practices. But James warned his readers that the Ford Company was no friend to the worker and that the company was attempting to use race to keep its workforce divided. James wrote, quote, "Ford is one of the most dangerous enemies of labor who exist in this country. This enemy of society has been laying a train of race hatred in Detroit and is now about to touch it off. The organized working class movement and the Negroes will have to fight hard and long to check and frustrate and defeat this sinister plot. This will be no easy fight." In other articles, James also used his pen to call out labor unions for not including black workers and to call for the unification of black and white workers in their struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So big news today across the country. McDonald's workers went on strike saying, look, the reality is we need to make a reasonable wage. We want $15 an hour for the start of minimum wage. And the important part, and I keep saying this, everyone says, oh, we fight for 15. Yes, fight for 15 in a union. 15's the floor. We want to do better than that. We want to sit down, negotiate for the wealth that our labor creates, and we get to share in that. All the workers I talk to every day, I say at the end of the day, you want the companies that you work for to be profitable so that you can sit down with them and demand more for yourself. And good on these workers for standing up for themselves. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on maybe a little bit on the strike of the day. Also some of the craziness that we're finally uncovering what happened down in Alabama. I've asked Max Berger to come talk with us. Max is the editorial director for the group More Perfect Union. They have been doing incredible reporting on labor issues across the country. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us. We're always happy to come by.
So let's jump on the strike today. You had workers in a number of places out demanding, as they have for the last couple, I guess, since 2012, $15 an hour and a union.
Yeah, it's really amazing, honestly, seeing how far they've come. I remember when they started, and there were a lot of folks, even within the labor movement, I think, who were very skeptical of this kind of approach of more social movement-oriented unionism, less, targeted at a specific work site or even industry, and really trying to push this narrative throughout the country and to change what people thought was politically possible. And I remember at the time, a lot of people thought that they were nuts for doing that the number was too high, that, this money was all a waste. And, it's pretty remarkable how much has shifted in a relatively short amount of time, where now, as you said, 15 is the floor is something that people in the Democratic Party are saying consistently. You have kind of the most mainstream politicians in the Democratic Party even agreeing to, by and large, it's kind of the standard demand at this point for Democrats, which is, enormously successful. And it's, we passed these ordinances in a whole bunch of cities and states. So, and I think looking at it in that kind of long-term perspective, it can't be seen as anything other than a huge success for the movement. Obviously we've yet to win at a national level, and there's still many, many states and cities in which we haven't succeeded. And even, the implementation of 15 in a lot of places is a lot slower and longer than many of us would like for it to be. And, what 15 was in 2012 isn't what 15 is now. And, 15 is still low by historical standards in terms of what workers were making back in the late 60s, early 70s, in terms of, what minimum wage would be if it was pegged to inflation. So, we're still just in some ways in the early days of this movement. But yeah, I think it's really remarkable to think about all that's been accomplished in the last, 8 or so years. And I think, what we saw in California with it's slipping my mind, but the name of the bill that they, the bill that they're pushing there, where the fight for 15 is now starting to branch off into demands around workers' rights and moving almost to a kind of sectoral bargaining approach, which again, I know is very controversial within the labor movement, but the movement is growing and it is building, and so starting to branch off in a lot of new and interesting directions, which I think is a sign of strength.
Yeah. No, I remember back in, it was the fall of, late fall of 2012. We had a bunch of people on when it first started off, because there were really two centers. There was New York, where it was coming out of, and Chicago. There were a restaurant group out of Chicago that they kind of folded together. And I remember at the time going, $15 an hour, you're never getting this. But I love the idea that you've put the goalposts far enough to where if you have to compromise, you're still going to be much better off. And I remember at the time saying, I love that. That's how you negotiate. That's how you do it. And look, as time has gone on, they've hardened that 15 where they're no longer negotiating off of that because, as you said, that was a much bigger ask in 2012 than it is in 2021.
Right. And, at this point, they've gotten, the movement has succeeded to such an extent that there are even some private employers that have met that demand without the kind of federal mandate or even the mandate in, the state or city that they're operating in. Famously, Amazon, was pushed to do it by Bernie and others. And so I think that's all really the result of the strength of the movement and the workers who've been leading it and their efforts.
But here's the thing, I go back and I look at Amazon work. I remember working that kind of a job back in the late 80s. And that wasn't a $15 an hour job. That was a $23 an hour job.
Oh, absolutely.
That was a much higher wage. So saying...
Right. Even now, I mean, compared to a lot of the other warehouse gigs that people are doing in those same areas, it's much lower, so it's not that 15 is some extraordinary feat, on the part of these companies, but I just mean to say that that has been established as a floor now,
right.
For even, some of the biggest employers in the world, is a big deal. And, the companies realize now that they get some credit for having hit 15, which, again, not to give them too much credit, but is a sign of strength of the movement of making that such a resonant demand.
Yeah, but Max, now you're talking about woke capitalism. We can't have woke capitalism. I don't know if you saw CNBC the other day, and I couldn't help but crack up when I saw we've now got woke capitalism going. What are you talking about? We still got greed mongers.
Capitalism as racist as possible. That's their thing. Yeah, I think, look, I don't want to celebrate any of these companies for having hit this bare minimum, but I think it says a lot about the strength of the movement that companies see it as a significant hurdle for them to get over. And it says a lot about the strength of the movement that companies are willing to do it.
Or I would go the other direction. They're doing it because they don't want that other half. Right. 15 in a union for me has always been the rallying cry. I know a lot of people are like, hey, fight for 15. Don't forget the other part, because that's the really important part. That's what gets you above that. That's what gets workers at Amazon to be able to sit down with a guy who's worth $1 gazillion and can buy a $500 million boat and say, we'd like better wages, hours, and conditions, and we demand it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you know, as well as anyone, so many of these fights really don't actually revolve around wages at the end of the day, but respect and dignity. That's the kind of thing that only a union can bring. And, even having a job with good wages doesn't necessarily guarantee those things if you don't have your coworkers who are going to stand by and fight with you.
Let's talk about that for a second, because they're now Amazon. We're now finding out a lot what was going on during the vote. Billboards in the bathrooms. They've hired, I guess they've admitted to 9 union busters that they brought in. All of the stuff that the lights, the mailbox, all of the stuff that they got away with. Walk me through some of the stuff that's going on right now around this.
In Staten Island or in with the NLRB?
With the NLRB. Yeah,
I mean, you referred to most of it. I think the most galling thing that we learned was the mailbox, which has always been kind of an extraordinary, a lot of the things that we've mentioned here are things that happen in a lot of these union fights, right? As I'm sure you know and have covered, union busters, it's kind of de rigueur at this point. We expect that they're going to have these high paid folks. I will say it is kind of extraordinary that they brought on to Amazon one of the kind of more famous high profile union busters to be their head of, I forget the fancy HR title they give to it, but basically like their internal union buster. So it's not just that they hire folks for these campaigns. We also learned that Dave Clark, who is a very high up Amazon employee, I believe he's like the head of HR, who has spoken very regularly about kind of the, kind of family atmosphere they have at Amazon, was personally very involved in the union busting effort. And through this NLRB here, and we also heard that this mailbox, which to me is really kind of the symbol of Amazon going much beyond anti-union propaganda, which again, we see in a lot of these campaigns, to at some point having physical access to these ballots, which is just a level of shadiness that I think is pretty unusual. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean they have so much power. They are able to con the U.S. Postal Service into dropping a box in right there so that they could surveil and, as you said, have access to. But here's the thing, like you said, this is stuff that goes on all the time. The kind of harassment, the kind of captive audience meetings, the kind of plastering anti-union billboards everywhere, making it almost impossible for union organizers to have any access to the workers, to have some balance in messaging.
Right.
All of this stuff is perfectly legal. But they went above and beyond that. What they spent $200 million?
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, which, when you think about what that is per worker, that is just extraordinary. And at the same time, when you think about that relative to their overall annual revenue, it's a drop in the bucket,
right?
Drop in the bucket. And you compare that to, not to get too, inside baseball about this, but you compare that to what the kind of resources that even an international has to throw at a campaign. I mean, that's an annual budget for a big IU, So it just goes to show kind of the how tilted the field is against us. And I think, we talked about this last time, but I think the one thing that was really good about what happened in Bessemer and the amount of coverage that it got was just, folks like you who followed this stuff for years understand the extent to which this is just a toolkit. And A, that the law is tilted against workers, and B, that they're willing still to go beyond what's legal, But I actually don't think that most working people really understand the extent to which that's true, especially when you're talking about people under 45 or under 40. And so I think part of what this process has really helped illuminate, and there's been some really remarkable coverage, I think we've done a good job. There are folks at Vice that I want to shout out that have been really, following the story and breaking news and done a really incredible job, telling what, getting access to some of these NLRB rulings against Amazon and showing the pattern, as you named, kind of the toolkit that they use. And as we've seen, as we move into this next kind of battle in this war with Amazon in Staten Island, the tactics that they, first used and developed in some of these early fights in 2014 and 2015, now, that they really refined in Bessemer, that they were forced to kind of step up as the movement, sort of also improved and stepped up their tactics. Now they're going to continue using in Staten Island and other places. So, I think the one good thing that's come of it thus far is we've seen a lot of coverage, right? Like the fact that we're talking about it now, the fact that this hearing was able to generate as much coverage as it did, I think is a good sign in terms of what, the kind of understanding of the public has around how tilted things are. And it comes at a really great time in terms of the fight around the PRO Act, obviously, where actual individuals would be held accountable for some of these offenses where, $100,000 is a penny of a penny of a penny to Amazon. But for Dave Clark, you might think twice. And when you go down the food chain at your, local organizing effort, that kind of fine starts to really carry a real threat.
There's some teeth in it, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not where I want to go. I'd like to see the PRO Act be a little bit more, a total repeal of Taft-Hartley is my goal. I want to go back to the original intent of the NLRA. To me, that's where we need to go because that worked. We built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization during that time period. And thanks to our Republican friends, time and time again, Taft-Hartley forward, we've seen an erosion of the standard of living of the average American worker. And that has everything to do with policy decisions because Amazon spent $200 million to convince those people and to intimidate and threaten those people to vote against the union.
Right. And it meant nothing to them. That was just it was pissing in the ocean. So they had plenty more where that came from. There's a great a report that came out just recently about wage suppression and the role that policy played in this. I mean, I just think it's a growing realization, I think, even amongst kind of economists and political elites, that the story that you're telling is just the truth, right? For a long time, people wanted to talk about it in terms of technology or globalization was driving down wages. And I think it's become more and more clear that no, it was the loss of labor power.
It's what we've been saying on this show for 16 years.
Yeah.
The economists didn't come up with a word specifically for corporate power keeping down wages for no reason if it didn't exist. And I always say it wrong. Something like monsopony is the word that they give it. And they go, they wouldn't come up with a specific word that I can mispronounce if it weren't actually happening.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely happening. And, I think we're at this really interesting moment where, I think a lot of people, we talked about this again last time, but, I think younger people are like, oh yeah, Taft-Hartley, let's go. Let's get rid of that. Let's go back. I mean, and even maybe even beyond that, right? But like part of the reason why I think Pro has generated so much activity and interest is that it would start to, begin to tip the scales. Working people would actually have the resources to continue that fight and continue moving the needle in that direction. And that would just be transformational.
So where you see, going back to the NLRB stuff, because right now the NLRB is still, what is it, 3-1?
Yeah.
You have the one woman who's the chairwoman, who's the only Democrat. So it's going to take a while for this to turn around. Even if Amazon's found guilty of all these stuffs, the penalty basically is don't do it again, post a notice, say you're sorry. And that's it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I don't want to pretend to know what the RWDSU folks are thinking in terms of their next campaign. As I'm sure you're aware, Teamsters have taken a crack at this as well in other places. So
yeah, because if they don't, UPS is done.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think there are probably a lot of, internationals that are looking at different parts of, because I mean, that's the other thing about Amazon that's so remarkable is that they touch so many industries, right? There's a conglomerate in it, they're one of the biggest players across so many different sectors of the economy. Yep. So, workers in all those different industries have to be concerned about the impact that Amazon is having on, either their already unionized workforce or others, who they wish to organize.
No, so, and the argument comes down to, are they workers or not? I mean, that's what the real Amazon fight is going to be in the coming years. And I'm sure something you guys are going to be covering. And look, I think you guys have been doing fabulous work. I hope folks will check out your work at perfectunion.us. Also follow you on Twitter at moreperfectus. I'm a big fan. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us as this continues down the road. Anytime.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for everything you do, man.
Good stuff, Max. I appreciate your time. Max Berger, editorial director there at More Perfect Union. Seriously, check out their stuff, moreperfectunion.us. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1920. That year, a national coal strike had won unionized miners a 27% pay raise. But the miners in West Virginia were not in the union. The United Mine Workers decided to launch an intensive campaign to organize this important coal mining region. It took courage to join the union. If the coal operators found out, you would be fired and thrown out of company housing. And so today in labor history, detectives from the infamous Baldwin Felts Company came to Matawan to evict miners who worked for the Stone Mountain Coal Company. Local police chief Sid Hatfield supported the workers. He showed up where the detectives were eating dinner with a warrant for the detectives' arrest. The detectives quickly produced their own warrant for Sid Hatfield's arrest. The two sides stood in the street in a standoff. Then, suddenly, a shot rang out. Miners dueled with the coal operators' hired guns. When the smoke cleared, 7 detectives and 2 miners were killed. Among the dead was Albert Feltz, one of the detectives who had earlier participated in the Ludlow massacre in Colorado. Sid Hatfield survived the gun battle and became a national folk hero. The next year, he was assassinated for his role in Mattawan. 10,000 angry miners took up arms in what has been called the largest insurrection since the Civil War. The fighting culminated in the Battle of Blair Mountain, where an estimated 1 million rounds were fired between the miners and the company's hired guns before the U.S. Army intervened and ended the battle. In 1987, John Sayles directed an acclaimed film based on the events in West Virginia. Mattawan became a classic, must-see film about the labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
Not only are the rich different from you and me, they're getting more different than ever. I'm not referring to mere millionaires, but to the billionaire bunch. In the past year, while ordinary Americans have lost jobs, businesses, and homes due to the pandemic economic crash, America's 664 billionaires have found themselves nearly 40% richer than before COVID. These fortunate few collectively added more than $1 trillion in 2020 to their personal stashes of wealth. And practically all of them got so much richer by doing nothing. Their money made the extra money for them because corporate stock prices zoomed even as regular people lost income. Take a peek at the richest of these different ones, Jeff Bezos, the alpha geek of Amazon. He hauled in an additional $75 billion last year, roughly $37 million an hour. You could do a lot of good with such riches, or you could splurge on yourself. Jeff splurged. He bought one of the largest sailing vessels ever built. More than 1 1/3 football fields long, the super yacht cost the diminutive mega-billionaire some $500 million. Plus, he'll pay some $60 million each year for operating expenses. Also, he had to buy a support yacht to sail along with his main boat. Why? Because the 3 sails on his 400-footer are so huge that a helicopter can't land on the deck, requiring an auxiliary yacht to provide a helipad. See, the rich really are different. Where to park our helicopter while at sea is a problem you and I don't have to face. This is Jim Hightower saying, according to mega yacht sellers, the main draw of these ostentatious purchases is that they reinforce inequality, literally letting the rich float in leisure and luxury oceans apart from even having to see hoi polloi like us. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I think about it, $200 million. I mean, that's not even the Austin Power guy with the finger. And I mean, $200 million Amazon spent to keep a union out of one of their facilities. And you go, you break that up, 5,000 people who are there. That would be enough money to cover multiple contracts down the road with sizable wage increases, much better health care, and even making the working conditions better. But Amazon said no, because it's about power. Money doesn't matter to them. It's about power. It's about their say. It's about control. And this is one of those weird kind of moments where you go, why would they spend such an enormous amount of money to keep a union out of a place that is a no rights at work state to begin with? Even if they would have won the election there in Bessemer, Alabama, it's still a designated no rights at work state. They still have the so-called right to work laws, which means that they can divide and conquer the workforce constantly. And what we know is in right to work states, wages are lower, healthcare coverage much lower, retirement security much lower, and poor working conditions much higher. The last study done by the AFL-CIO shows southern states and the right to work states have much higher fatality, I'll say it, and injury rates. We know this. These are the facts. This is the reality. And they would spend, trust me, if it cost $1 billion, they'd have spent it just for the control purpose, just so they have unlimited say. Now, this is a place where reportedly, this is a place that has 100% turnover. Stop and think about in the jobs that maybe you've worked at. I think about mine. I've worked in the freight industry pretty much the entire time that I've worked. I've worked for companies who boasted having a 1% turnover rate. They boasted that they paid such good wages, they had good benefits. This is how things used to be. Companies wanted to retain the best people to do the jobs. They didn't want a constant churn. And in a unionized workforce, you have a more stable workforce. Why? Because wages are generally higher. Healthcare benefits are generally better. Retirement security, generally better. A voice on the job, absolutely much better. This whole idea that, we've got an open door policy. We've got a suggestion box. Then when you go to use it, then they fire you. And the perfect example is that Trader Joe's story. The guy, put a letter in saying, hey, this is how I'd like to see you protect us from COVID. And they said, sorry, we don't think you're Trader Joe material. There's the door. And told him flat out, you're an at-will employee. You have no rights to the job. Get out. That's that's what corporate America wants. And I find it interesting, like we talked about yesterday, that Janet Yellen came out, the Treasury Secretary, and said, corporate America, talking to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we want you to pay higher taxes, and we want you to let your workers unionize. And for a moment, I'm putting myself at one of those tables, imagining what the CEOs and the high muckety-mucks of these corporations, America's oligarchy, I'm wondering what they're thinking. Going, is she crazy? We've got workers right where we want them. Nearly desperate and exploitable. The fear level of people that I've talked to is through the roof. It's one of those things where, I studied labor history, and because I fear we're repeating it. And you go back to some of the stories of the coal camps and these company towns, and how the benevolent robber barons of yesteryear would have these towns, and you were indebted to them for your entire lives. You were indebted to the company store, the company doctor, the company housing. You never got out of debt. Generationally, you were never out of debt. And they kept you coming to work. They had squads that would come get you and make you go to work. Now, we don't have that anymore. We just have Republican legislators who are doing everything they can do to make sure that we're desperate enough to have to go back. Instead of making conditions better, instead of making workplaces better, instead of paying better wages, we have politicians who force people into those situations. I'm of the mindset, again, if there's a labor shortage, I was taught in economics that wages and benefits and conditions and all that stuff went up naturally. The invisible hand did that. It was magic. It was the free market. Because we've been led to believe that the free market solves all of our problems. And the interesting part of it is, as I had a conversation today, the free market is only a free market if you have the option to abstain, to decide not to participate. You don't have that in a lot of your life. Now, you go into a Walmart, or you go into a Target, or you go into a store, you have the right to not buy the product. Pick it up, look at it, put it down, I'm going to walk away. But things like education, things like healthcare, things like your employment, there's no option to go, I'm not going to do it. And this is where free market principles don't always work. And this is where in the workplace, I do believe there has to be a balance of power. You know, the fact that Pennsylvania's workers' compensation law still refers to the management and employee relationship as master and servant, for me, is quite telling. Because that's where a lot of people would like to see us go back to. You know, one of the fears that I've had for a long time, especially with our Supreme Court, and all of this push towards gig economy and all this push towards, you're your own boss, you're an independent contractor, which Amazon is pushing at really, really alarming rates. In fact, you know, I said a minute ago that if the Teamsters and other unions don't get the ability to organize Amazon, first as employees, UPS and companies like that are done. Because those cute little Amazon vans you see tooling around, a lot of those are independent contractors. A lot of those are, you know, I'm my own boss. I get to lease the van. I get to lease a job with the hope that I'm going to get paid by the package and then bear all the responsibilities. Yet, yet Amazon has absolute say in weird things like grooming, for instance. You not limited to, but you can't have an unpleasant breath or unpleasant body odor. You can only use modest perfume or cologne. You need clean teeth. You need your face and your ears must be groomed. Your fingernails must be clean. Your hair must be combed. I mean, they go down, but they're not employees. So you have to abide by this code of ethic, this code of hygiene, this code of behavior, all of this stuff. You have to refrain from certain social media. There's a bunch of training programs that you have to go through. There's a whole bunch but you're not an employee. You're an independent contractor. You're your own boss. You are drug tested randomly, whatever Amazon wants you to be. But still, you're your own boss. Now you go, what's the big deal? These are people who, you know, they want to buy a big van and they want to deliver packages. The big deal is you're destroying what are family sustaining jobs for desperation jobs. The wages that these folks make, they're okay. But understand, Amazon isn't going to open up its business like this if it didn't benefit them. If they weren't making money off of being able to exploit a workforce by not paying unemployment insurance, by not paying workers' compensation, by not paying state and local taxes, by not paying FICA or Medicare or anything into Social Security or any of that stuff, they're saving all of that, and you're getting like $20 an hour. And on the short term, you go, hey, that's a good thing. I'm doing all right. Until you realize you've got nothing else. If everything dries up, hey, you're on your own, buddy. And what this has got me thinking back to is, you know, that era of the company store. This idea that you were indebted to the company store for your existence. And if you screwed up, there was nothing under your feet. If you got hurt, there was nothing. If you got killed, and I tell this story all the time. I remember years ago, I was a big brother for a number of years, and I took the kid up to Lackawanna County to one of the coal mines, and they did this really great coal mine tour. Took you down into the mines, like 300 feet underground, on one of those little carts. It was amazing, and they had these dolls set up all over the place, and so they could go through and talk about what their jobs were. And the kid that I was a big brother to, he was about 8 years old at the time. And immediately he walked over to the doll that was exactly his height. Looked almost like him. It was kind of scary. It was really, really freaky. And, you know, the guy saw him and brought us over, and everyone started telling the story that kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, his job was to open and close the door. That was the fire break. So when the carts would come through, he would open the door and then close it behind the cart so that there were breaks. Evidently, according to the guy who gave the tour, that kid had a 50% fatality rate. Let that sink in for a second. You're desperate. You're so desperate as a family that you're going to send your 6, 7, 8-year-old child into a mine knowing that half of them are not coming back. And he told the story of how when the kid gets killed, because what happened, as he explained, is the areas are tight. There's a little stool that they sit on. And if they don't pay attention, maybe they fall asleep. Maybe something happens because they work 12-hour days. The cart would come barreling down the track and slam the door open and crush the kid between the door and the wall. Understand, they bore down into the ground here. These aren't spacious areas. And he said the foreman's job was to go down, take your bloody, broken body and throw you on a coal cart, take you up to the surface, put you on the back of a buggy and take you home. And when they got to the house that you lived in, they'd take your broken, bloody, battered, dead body and throw it against the door so that whoever was inside would hear your bones knock on the door, and that was your eviction notice. That's the world we came from. We're not that harsh anymore. I don't know that we would put up with that anymore. Maybe it's coming and I just don't see it yet. But this is one of those things where everyone's going to be an independent contractor. Everyone's going to be on their own, and they're going to be indebted because they got to buy the trucks and the Uber cars, and they got all of this investment. And guess what? There's nobody else out there to take it on. So either you do what you're told, you fall in line, you work for the company store, you're indebted to them, or there's nothing for you. This is the world we're moving towards. And this is why the people are fighting so hard to keep these gig jobs as you're your own boss. You don't want someone telling you what to do. Because they don't want to pay the workers' comp, the unemployment, Social Security, Medicare, state and local taxes. They don't want to pay any of that stuff. They want to keep it for themselves. That's how they're raking in more profits. Well, it's more for them, less for everybody, less for working people. Back to the company store. And we've got a Supreme Court who's hell-bent on taking us back to the old days of the Lochner era, where if you were desperate enough and hungry enough to work 100 hours a week for poverty wages, that was your choice. It was your liberty. Because we're seeing the same kind of stories coming up now. So when I'm telling you that the PRO Act is the minimum that we need right now to save the working class of this country, I believe that. Again, I would like to see something much better. I would like to see the total repeal of Taft-Hartley and give us the ability for all states to have equal organizing opportunities. Because we've seen what's happened. We've watched companies move from the Northeast, from unionized states to southern no rights at work states, and then right out to Mexico or China or wherever. We need policies that are going to stop that. They're going to hold people accountable when they do stuff like that. Just my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. That was the day 31 dock workers were killed and hundreds more were injured in an explosion at the Raritan River Port in South Amboy, New Jersey. Workers were loading ammunition from freight trains onto ships. The freight's ultimate destination was Pakistan. Practically every structure in South Amboy suffered some form of serious or structural damage, with windows blown out everywhere and debris reported as far as 25 miles away. 5,800 300 more unexploded anti-personnel mines had been strewn about the port. Demolition experts had to be called in for removal. A subsequent fire at a nearby agricultural phosphorus plant complicated their work. The blast was caused by the detonation of 150 tons of military explosives and gelatin dynamite. The piers, equipment, and railroad cars were all demolished. Over a dozen nearby barges were either on fire or sank. Emergency operations went into effect and a state of emergency was declared. Key industries in the immediate area were seriously damaged, including the International Smelting and Refining Company, Pennsylvania Railroad maintenance shops, and the power plant for New Jersey Power and Light. According to a report by the National Board of Fire Underwriters and the Fire Insurance Rating Organization of New Jersey, packing of the mines and fuses by the Kilgore Company was not in accordance with Army standards, and labeling was confusing. The shipped mines were labeled as M1A1, though all parts but the detonator were identical to M1 mines, discontinued by the Army in 1942 for their apparent defective fuse, leading to accidental firing and explosions. The report refrained from drawing a certain cause or assigning blame. Instead, the underwriters offered a number of possible scenarios and recommendations for best practices to be implemented. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, thank you, Janice, for sending me this Washington Post article. At the beginning, I said I'm waiting for someone to say we need to recognize their trauma. I said at the beginning that we need empathy for their trauma. We need to respect that. That was going to eventually be a defense. Janice sent me a Washington Post article and now look, I didn't read this before now. This as I'm reading it during the break, I'm literally stunned by. Evidently, the attorney for the QAnon shaman, the guy who had the thing, the helmet and all that stuff, the 33-year-old guy named Jacob Anthony Chansley, evidently, the attorney says that this Chansley guy and other Capitol rioters, they're susceptible to accepting baseless claims. They're easily duped. What we used to call back when I was a kid as stupid, we're now saying they were easily duped. When I was a kid, we called them easy marks. Now they're just easily duped. He goes on. I guess I got to look for the talking points memo bit, but evidently had a expletive latent rant over there, pointing out that they have diminished mental capacity, that they have brain damage, is what he said. He went on to say that the rioters, they're not bad people. They're not bad people at all. They're just easily duped, and they're in need of empathy. We should feel sorry for stupid who are easily duped into committing acts of violence and crimes. I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, and this is one of those weird moments where you go, I wonder if the people who attacked the Capitol had black faces, how much empathy they would have gotten. Because look, I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for this argument that, we believed what Donald said because, he's our president. We have no ability to reason or any ability to think in terms of common sense or critically. We're just, oh, poor us. Feel sorry for us. Show us some humanity. And I'm going, I think I'm struggling with this. Now, as someone who is, on a more liberal side of things, I do believe that we do need to show people who have true intellectual deficits some help. I do believe in helping people with their challenges, without question. This a little different. Because remember, the Republican Party, these are the people, go back to George W. Bush as governor of Texas. These are the people who want to fry, especially black people who have 80 IQs. These are the people who it's all about law and order, except when it's them. The level of entitlement here. As I'm reading through this bit, and I gotta find the actual thing. And again, thank you, Janice, for pointing this out. But arguing, they're not bad people. They're just easily duped. Oops. Sorry, our bad. I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling with that in a big way. Now, do I think they were duped? Yeah, but here's the thing. I think every person who voted for Donald Trump, unless you can articulate that, hey, I was in it for the tax cuts, I was in it for the deregulation, I was in it for the what they got, and what you knew he was going to stand for. Look, I didn't care what he did. I want to do away with abortion. If you tell me that stuff, I understand. I don't agree with you. I don't think they're good policies, but I understand what your motives were. But this nonsense, well, he's a good God-fearing Christian who loves the country and he's sacrificing for us. All of that narrative stuff, complete and total bunk. Nonsense. He was a con man when he started. He's a con man now. And he's going to get bitten at some point. And it's interesting to me because, Michael Cohen today, his former fixer, actually came out and said that he thinks Trump is going to throw his own kids under the bus when it comes time to, pay the piper. Because as Cohen pointed out, I guess he did this back in 2019 is when he came out with the statement that he said, quote, "It was my experience that Trump inflated his total assets when it served his purposes, such as being listed among the wealthiest people in Forbes, and he deflated his assets to reduce his real estate taxes." That, my friends, that's against the law. But he came out today. He said he thinks he's going to actually flip on his own kids and the wife. The wife I can understand because she'd flip on him in a heartbeat. I see no question in that. But that's a whole different level. The fact that he would throw the kids under the bus to save himself, I actually don't doubt that. Now, here's the weird thing. I go back to the elderly gentleman I had the conversation with this afternoon. Even he agreed that Trump kind of is a con man. Bought the narrative that, he loves the country and he gave his salary back, trying to make us great again. He bought that stuff, but still that he was a con man, because anybody who spent any time in New York understands he's a con man. He is what he is. I look at this and again, I think I love this defense. I think I do. I think this is my new favorite. I'm sorry. Don't hold us accountable. We're just stupid. I think that's great. Taking some responsibility for yourself. Sorry, Your Honor. I'm just freaking stupid. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I wasn't thinking. The brain was off that day. Actually, it's been off the last 4 years. Been watching Fox News. Sorry, Your Honor. I've been listening to the talk radio. I'm listening to Rush for 30 years, and it's rotted my brain. That's a defense. I'm sure there's a psychiatrist, and we got to get a psychiatrist on to help me work through this. There's got to be a psychiatrist out there who's going to go, yes, Your Honor. He should be forgiven. We need therapy. Get him some therapy. Put him into a special home. He shouldn't be in jail. Stupid shouldn't be a crime. Is this where it's going? Is this how we're going to forgive the traitors who broadcast their treason? Sorry, Your Honor. Brain fart. I don't know, man. Can I take a mulligan on this? I'm help. I'm struggling here. if this is the defense. I can't wait to see My Cousin Vinny Part 2, where Joe Pesci comes out and said, the two youths are just stupid. I mean, am I missing something? What happened to personal responsibility? What happened to that? What happened to the party of personal responsibility? What happens to, I did it? No. It was the MAGA hat that, no. It wasn't stupid. It was part of it. The red dye from the MAGA hats made them stupid. That's what it was. It was Chinese MAGA red. We could call it a syndrome. We could have a self-help group. Oh, man, we could do so many things with this. All we need is one shyster lawyer and one psychiatrist who's a little on the shady side. We could make stuff up. Hey! He was suffering from red dye-itis. The Chinese dye got into his brain and made him freaking stupid. That's where we are, folks. Crazy, scary. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. And no red dye. Right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Chaos left in the wake of Colonial Pipeline's ransomware attack.
Calls grow for federal oversight of energy infrastructure cybersecurity.
The city can't seem to catch a break. It's still reeling from Hurricanes Laura and Delta last year and an ice storm in February.
More disasters for Lake Charles, Louisiana. Pipeline company defies Michigan governor's shutdown order. Plus,
for the second time in a little more than 3 months, a refinery has rained oil over homes on the Caribbean island of St. Croix.
EPA shuts down U.S. Virgin Islands refinery as imminent threat to public health.
All of those disaster tales and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It is so long to snow days for New York City students. The Department of Education says that it will now keep 2 practices from last year. During severe weather, students will shift to remote learning instead of canceling school. And Election Day will also be a remote instruction day.
That's right, kids. The bad news is snow days are over. The good news is, thanks to climate change, soon there won't be any more snow. Yeah!
This is your Green News Report.
Oh, that's not a good thing?
Okay, Desi Doyen, more trouble, really, for Lake Charles, Louisiana?
Yes, unfortunately, as we go to air, another flooding emergency has been declared in Louisiana and Texas after more than 17 inches of rain fell in 12 hours in some areas on Monday.
Really?
Especially hard hit was beleaguered Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is still trying to repair and recover from damage caused by those 2 major hurricanes last year, Laura and Delta, and that deadly February ice storm that knocked out power to several states. You've likely heard by now that Colonial Pipeline paid $5 million in ransom to hackers and...
Yes, you heard it here on the Green News Report when I told you the Colonial paid off for the ransom, and then, of course, an hour or 2 later, they finally admitted it.
Yes, they did.
You're welcome.
Colonial intentionally shut down the pipeline because the hackers prevented it from billing its customers. The widespread disruption that caused has led to broad calls for the federal government to establish the first ever minimum cybersecurity standards for the nation's critical infrastructure. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, in an interview with The Hill, noted that about 85% of U.S. infrastructure is privately owned, with almost no federal cybersecurity protections.
An enormous responsibility comes with that stewardship. And I do think we need to take a real look at a policy level at what's being done. When you have data at stake, when you have security at stake, private actors have public responsibilities. And when that's the case, we do need to make sure there's the right oversight.
Even Republicans and Democrats in Congress agree on the need to develop cybersecurity regulations for both the private and public energy sectors, including requiring companies like Colonial to inform the federal government when they're victims of a major cyber attack. However, Huffington Post reports that fossil fuel lobbyists like the American Petroleum Institute are already working hard to block such requirements for the nation's oil and gas industry.
Of course they are.
Showdown in Michigan. Pipeline company Enbridge has defied Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer's orders to shut down its troubled 70-year-old Line 5 pipelines that run under the Straits of Mackinac in the Great Lakes. The Canadian oil company Enbridge has refused, saying the state doesn't have the authority to shut it down. Whitmer terminated the easement that allowed Enbridge to operate the pipelines, citing its abysmal safety record, and the governor is now threatening to go after Enbridge's profits.
An international incident.
In the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Biden Environmental Protection Agency has taken the extremely rare step of invoking its emergency powers under the Clean Air Act to order the temporary shutdown of the Lime Tree oil refinery for 60 days, citing, quote, an imminent risk to public health. The accident-prone refinery had been shuttered for years due to serious environmental violations, but the Trump administration allowed private equity owners to reopen it in February. Since then, the refinery has rained oil on residents, contaminating St. Croix's drinking water supplies, and several times released toxic gases that sickened hundreds of people and forced schools to close.
So this thing is finally shut down?
Only temporarily, until an investigation can be conducted.
Well, I hope it's a really long investigation.
Finally, some good news. The Biden administration has begun the process of repealing a Trump-era regulation that officials at the time admitted was intended to block the EPA from writing new air pollution rules. The Trump rule tried to restrict the EPA's cost-benefit analysis of new public health standards by eliminating the benefit part, preventing the agency from considering co-benefits of cleaner air like lower costs from killing fewer people. It was intended to help polluting industries find a way to legally challenge future pollution rules by making new standards appear to be too costly to industry with no benefits. The Biden EPA has now launched the process to roll back that rule.
Thank God we have a new president. Not a moment too soon. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I can't get over this lawyer. I got to tell you, if I had a lawyer that my defense is now his statement said, a lot of the defendants, and I'm going to use this colloquial term, perhaps disrespectfully, but they're all effing short bus people. They're people with brain damage. They're all effing retarded, he says. They're on the spectrum, and he goes on to this bizarre rant. They're all our brothers and sisters, though. They're part of our country. They're not bad people. Yeah, these are people who broke into the Capitol. I guess defecating on the floor is not a normal act. Yeah, but if your defense is sorry, I'm stupid, I think you should probably get a different lawyer. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick. One thing you have to say about that attorney, though, he managed to insult at least 3 different groups.
Everybody.
At one time, right.
Yeah, you go, I got to know what school he got his law degree from. I'm sure it was the University of whatever online.
You know, it just wasn't like this 15 years ago. It's getting crazy, crazier.
Oh, but do you think that's a valid defense? I'm sorry, I was stupid.
Well, I mean, I know people that have used that in other cases, but no, I don't think it's valid in this one. You know, if you filled out something wrong, or you did this, or you cashed a check or something, yeah, you know, I was stupid. But when you break into the Capitol and defecate and threaten to hang people, don't use the, I'm stupid or weird defense.
Yeah, no, but like you said, he virtually offended, a whole bunch of people.
Everybody.
Maybe that was the way to taint the jury pool, that you could never see the jury.
Maybe. Right.
Maybe that's it. Other good news. Remember the guy in the pink shirt from St. Louis who was pointing the gun at all the protesters walking by, him and his wife?
Right.
Mark McCluskey?
Right.
He is running for Congress. I'm sorry, he's running for U.S. Senate.
Really?
Yep, you're going to run for Senate there in the great state of Missouri.
Yeah, well, he won't make it. People have, look, people have their 5 minutes in the, in the bask of the media, and then they think that will catapult them into a run. Yeah, he waved the rifle at the protesters. Yeah, right.
I got to tell you, I hope he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, like Marjorie Taylor Greene has, for me, been wildly entertaining. Lauren Boebert is a good source of entertainment. There are a bunch of them. Gosser, he's been entertaining. The guy in Georgia who said it was just a normal day in the Capitol, even though they've got video of him barricading himself with this feared look on his face. They have been at least entertaining on a certain level.
Well, Congressman Freddie Upton, by the way, he accepts being called Freddie. I served with him.
Okay.
He's Republican, and he made some good comments, I thought, about the fact that to call it what it is. I mean, you can argue whether you need the commission. Frankly, Rick, I think they could have set it up different, to be honest with you, and done it different internally. But that's neither here nor there. When somebody wants to then use that commission vote as a measure as to whether you think these people were tourists or not, it's just simply bizarre. I mean, I think you can recognize and say they were insurrectionists, they were destructive, they were potentially trying to murder someone, they were crazy. But maybe I don't want to commission this way. Maybe we do it another way.
Yeah.
But to just make this the litmus test that they were tourists that's stupid in itself.
Yeah, they weren't bad people, though, Bob. They weren't. They were just stupid. No, that's all. They built a gallows, and they were running around saying, hang Mike Pence. And Mike Pence's brother, voted against the commission.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Personally, I think there has to be a commission. I think we need this as a country to see what happened. I think out in public, it has to be exposed. Who did what, where, when, and how. And I think it's just not the people who were there, not the people who were whizzing on the desks and dumping on the floor and breaking windows and hitting cops with pipes, but also the representatives and whatever encouragement or help they may have given. And then for me, the more important one is the moneyed interest who funded all this stuff, the people who got the folks there, the people who funded the bus trips and funded these groups and have been funding these groups for a very long time. For me, that's the important part of it.
See, I agree with everything you said. The other part that I have a problem with, and I'll just go back quickly to Congressman Steny Hoyer, who everybody knows he's the number 2 Democratic member in the House now. He was my ranking member House administration when I chaired it. After ricin, after anthrax, and after a plane headed to the Capitol 911, Steny and I put together a very intensive, accurate, honest, transparent internal working group to see where everything went wrong, right? And so I think what they're doing to find out how this built up, how it happened, who encouraged what, who paid for what is great. I think the congressional side of it, though, they know where the errors were. They can bring in experts. They can handle this one. I don't think they have to have all the outside people. That's just personal opinion.
Yeah. Benghazi had
the commission itself is good.
Benghazi had 10 investigations.
Right. Oh, yes. It went on. I would hope they don't do this 10 times. Let's just get it the first time and do it.
Get it right. I don't know that I'm thrilled with the idea of it ending on December 31st. I don't think a hard end date like that short is a good thing, but I understand we don't want this to bleed over into the political season of 2022, which, again, is probably why Republicans were so dead set against it. 175 of them voted against it. Because they think that they're not going to be painted with this through the election cycle. I got another thing coming for them.
Right. It'll be interesting to watch the Senate. They need to peel off about 10 Republicans, obviously, or cut some kind of deal with McConnell. I know he says now he's not going to do it, but that's not necessarily going to hold out that way.
Well, just yesterday he said he was okay with it. Now today he's flipped back.
Turned,
Who knows where he goes?
Turn again.
But is this a moment, do you think, where you finally go, you know what? If I can't get the votes we need where we end the filibuster, is this where that goes?
Well, you know me. I would have, if I was running the show, I would have ended it 15 years ago. That's me. And now, look, on the Democratic side, eventually, as you know, and anybody that studies this business knows, eventually push is going to come to shove. If they don't have the vote, I don't care what kind of heat they get, you end it.
Yeah.
You end it. And you have a normal majority vote. And, if Republicans don't like that, elect Republicans next time and take over the Senate.
Yep.
That's how you change filibusters.
That's my view as well.
Yeah, sure.
Wanted to get your thoughts on the Supreme Court's going to be took the Roe versus Wade case. What's going on in Mississippi? They're now pointing out that Amy Coney Barrett evidently took some speaking fees from one of the groups that is, claiming that the Mississippi abortion ban is their baby. Is that a conflict of interest?
Well, that's going to be interesting to see how she does that. I don't know the history of this. Have justices ever recused themselves?
There have been a couple of times that has happened. I think just recently, I know Kagan has done it.
Okay.
Right when she took the bench, because she was actually involved in something in one of her other roles, and I'm not sure if Gorsuch did or not.
Well, I mentioned that because if she recuses herself, if the heat comes up, and she does, and if she took speaking fees, she might have to consider that. And if she's out of that, I still think, and this will just probably sound ridiculous to your listeners, I think Kavanaugh's a wild card on this, being a Mississippi 15 weeks, after 15 weeks you can't have the abortion. He might be a wild card on this.
Yeah, I mean, if she recuses herself, I see it coming down. I don't think you need Kavanaugh. I think it becomes a 4-4, and it reverts back to the lower court's decision, which was, this is unconstitutional.
Right. I still think, I listened closely when he testified for the nomination process, and if he would hold to what he said in the law of the land, it would be interesting to see how. Because you shouldn't take a 15-week rule in Mississippi and use that to overturn all of Roe versus Wade.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess that would be the federal level then, is where they would go then. Wouldn't that be for all states then, wouldn't it?
Yes. Right. Right.
And this is that kind of death of 1,000 paper cuts that they're moving toward. Eventually to be 12, eventually to be 10, eventually, then they just, to the point where now, look, I'm not someone who's in favor of abortions.
Right.
I think they need to be safe and legal, and the Bill Clinton line: safe, legal, and rare.
And rare.
Because I've told this story before. As a kid, I remember my mother telling the story of a friend who had gotten a botched abortion in Kentucky, because that's where evidently people went back when it was before it was legal, and she didn't do well.
Right.
And I don't know, as a society, that we're ready to go back to those days.
To that, the back alley.
Are we really going to be locking people up? Because look, the reality is, rich people are going to get what they want. They're going to have the resources to go anywhere where it will be legal, because it still will be legal in a number of states. It's just those poor states where poor people live in those poor states, and they won't be able to get out.
Right.
No, this is one of those weird kind of moments.
I think it'll end up in a tie.
So you're a little more optimistic than I am. All right. Yeah.
I think so. I still think I'm just throwing it out there about Kavanaugh. People will say I've lost my mind, but I'm throwing it out there.
Yeah, we'll see. I hope you're right, because this is an issue that is not going away. We'll go back to your state, Ohio. How's the lottery going? I understand a lot of people signed up.
Yeah, look, people are. I had a message tonight. Because of course, I was active in Republican politics, and people are like, is DeWine going to lose the primary? What do you think? Is the lottery going to finish him? No, the lottery's not going to finish the governor. It's not going to happen that way. I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world. You have a lottery, okay, gets people to get vaccinated. I think it's okay. Some people have suggested it's illegal, taxpayers' money to bribe people. Gambling is gambling, whether it's from getting a shot, buying a ticket, whatever you do. So I think it's okay. I think people, will probably sign up. Hey, if it vaccinates another, we're at 2% now in America, et cetera. Yep. If it vaccinates another 8% or 10% in Ohio, that's okay.
No, what I saw is that evidently the numbers have jumped pretty dramatically, surprisingly, because people are, hey, I can finally have a retirement plan.
Sure. Yeah.
What'd they say on Monday alone? They had over 25,000 people got the vaccine.
Right.
They want to get their ticket before Wednesday, man.
Right, and it's going to go on for multiple weeks. So if you can get another 100,000 people in a state of 11 million people, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Did you got your ticket yet?
No.
You didn't sign up?
No, I didn't.
Oh, because I know you got vaccinated.
I did.
And that's a good thing. Last question. Yeah. What are you doing in Denver?
Well, I came out. This is amazing, Rick. I was so shocked at what a small world. I came out, and the Denver Broncos, they have a banner out here, and it says, "Go Rick Smith." Yeah. I didn't know how you managed that, but, I mean, they are fans of the Rick Smith show.
Are you sure it wasn't the guy who was one of the...
They know you're their number one fan. I just love that your wife gives me all this information. I love it. Carol's wonderful.
She is. That's why we've been married over 20 years.
I'm visiting with a friend out here, and just decided to take a 4-day jaunt out to beautiful Colorado.
Good for you. Good for you. You need a break every once in a while.
This was my first post-COVID flight.
Did you wear your mask through the whole flight? Did anyone mock you?
I sure didn't. Nobody did anything, said anything. Good. Everybody was very well behaved. I took my sips and my pretzels and put the mask back down in between, and I was a very good boy. I behaved.
Yeah, it could be that what is it, like a $35,000 fine if you do something wrong now?
Yeah, see, I don't have the privilege anymore. If you can't detain me, I'm on my way to vote. I got to behave.
There you go. Good for you, man. I hope you enjoy your time. I appreciate you taking time for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. I'm sure he is joking. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that black author and Marxist theorist C.L.R. James passed away. James was born in Trinidad, at the time a Caribbean colony that was part of the British Empire. His father was a school teacher. James became a leading intellectual on the subject of black liberation. His most famous work, The Black Jacobins, tells the story of the 1791 Haitian Revolution, when enslaved black Haitians successfully overthrew French colonial rule. James was a frequent contributor to Labor Action, a Marxist journal produced in New York from 1940 to 1958. He wrote about the struggles of black workers. He often penned fiery language. For example, in 1941, James wrote an article imploring black workers not to cross the picket line during a strike against the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Ford had a reputation of hiring black workers at a time when many employers discriminated in their employment practices. But James warned his readers that the Ford Company was no friend to the worker and that the company was attempting to use race to keep its workforce divided. James wrote, quote, "Ford is one of the most dangerous enemies of labor who exist in this country. This enemy of society has been laying a train of race hatred in Detroit and is now about to touch it off. The organized working class movement and the Negroes will have to fight hard and long to check and frustrate and defeat this sinister plot. This will be no easy fight. In other articles, James also used his pen to call out labor unions for not including black workers and to call for the unification of black and white workers in their struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So interestingly enough, the ballot initiatives here in Pennsylvania passed the two horrible ones limiting the ability of a governor to act in a time of emergency, limiting his abilities to 21 days, and then having to beg a dysfunctional legislature to do something. And the question that I keep coming back to, what happens if the legislature can't come up with a solution? Does nothing get done? Do we have no ability to react in a moment of crisis because you've now neutered him? This is where my mind is. You don't have an executive now. You've said, hey, we're going to limit the time and we're going to rely on the General Assembly. I guess we'll find out when a crisis hits. And I guess we'll find out if we made the wrong decision when that happens. Now, 2022, the next gubernatorial election here in Pennsylvania. One of the folks now throwing his name in, giant glowing teeth, perfectly spray-tanned, giant hair, former mayor of Hazleton, Lou Barlotta, former congressman, formerly my congressman. Ran into him a couple of times on the street. Not particularly fond of him. I think he would be a bad choice for governor. But he has thrown his hat in. Oddly enough, I don't think he's the worst choice, though. I still think State Senator Doug Mastriano would be the worst possible choice. Going to be interesting to see how the Trump effect plays out. Because I think Mastriano, since he was there on Insurrection Day, rooting people on from behind, go boys, go on in there, go get them, yelling from the sidelines. He did have the kangaroo court in Gettysburg. He did have that, the super spreader event that got a bunch of people COVID. And my favorite moment when Rudy, they literally held the phone to the microphone and listened to Trump rant for about 40 minutes. I got to tell you, nothing more riveting than a hearing of someone ranting over a bad cell phone connection. Nothing more riveting. But hey, it was must-watch TV, and thank you, Doug Mastriano, for that. And as you may remember, the good senator then went to the White House right afterwards with COVID. So I'm sure he shared that with some folks as well. Now, Barlotta is in. Last time you may remember his name, he lost in 2018 when he ran for U.S. Senate against Bob Casey. Going to be interesting to see how the gubernatorial race shapes up. I'm looking at who the Democrat may be. We should be seeing that here in the next couple of months. I'm thinking Josh Shapiro is probably going to throw his name in. I'm thinking that, maybe, and I don't know, maybe Eugene DePasquale, maybe. I don't know. History in this state's a little weird because I don't believe we've had a party win back-to-back terms. We've got term limits. You're limited to 2 terms. I don't remember the last time a party got a third term, where you had your 2-term governor who then term limited out, and then that party remained in power. We've done that at least as long as I've lived here. We've done that kind of 2 terms and flip, or 1 term and flip, as with 1-term Tom Corbett, which it's this perfect storm of horrible here in PA. Because I've said that we could be the next no rights at work state. Which would make corporate America all tingly in the panties and happy. It'd be horrible for working people, because what we know from right to work states who have that terrible designation, lower wages, less health care, less retirement security, less safe workplaces. We know that to be the case. And that's not something I think that we want here. And also it brings back the wonders of at-will employment, which means, hey, I can fire you because I just don't like you. Scary, sad, and well, potentially our future. But going to be interesting to see how it plays out. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.